Mega Man X4 is one of the best games ever made. I've played a lot of games in my life, especially in the Mega Man series, and this is the big one. It's the one I want to review the most because it's my favorite. So what makes it so amazing? Well, let's get into it. But first, I'd really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. It would really help me out. Thanks. The main innovation to the standard Mega Man X formula in this game is the inclusion of Zero. Unlike X3, he's a fully playable character this time, with his own playthrough you select at the start. Zero plays pretty differently from X. He's a melee fighter, so you need to get up close and personal to all the enemies. You can use the Z-Saber to slash at enemies with the 3-piece combo on the ground, or slice them down in the air. He can't collect armor parts or special weapons, but instead he gets techniques when he defeats Mavericks. And these are pretty useful. Like, one gives him the air dash, another nets him an uppercut, one is a strong Giga attack that fires in every direction and is the only projectile Zero gets. But easily the best technique is the double jump, which is really helpful in a platformer and also upgrades the aerial slash to swing in a circle around Zero. This is really great since you can hit more enemies just as long as you're close enough to them. It's also pretty strong and is the main way I attack enemies with Zero. So Zero's gameplay is solid. His different playstyle makes his playthrough feel distinct from X while still being fun. But what about Mega Man X? Well, he's here and he's amazing. X plays basically the same as he did in the Super Nintendo games. One thing that's different is you can now dash jump by holding down the button before pressing jump, whereas before you had to press both buttons at the same time. It's a small change, but I like it. As always, the main thing that's new with X is his armor parts. The leg parts once again give you the horizontal air dash, but this time you get the ability to hover in the air for a few seconds, which is amazing on boss fights when they try to hit you on the ground. I use this much more than the leg parts in the previous games. I also like the contrast where X gets to hover in the air, while Zero gets an extra jump. The body part as always halves the damage you take, and has a single-use Giga attack. This time it's called the Nova Strike, but like in X2, I never use this. Still, damage reduction by 50% is always nice. And now we get to the mother of all armor parts in the series, the Buster parts. There are actually 2 in this game, and you're free to choose which one you want. The stock charge shot gives you 4 mini charge shots to fire individually. To be honest, I've never really used this, because after you get the Buster parts, you have to fight this mini boss, and it's actually kind of annoying with this upgrade. I know some people prefer it, and it's what the speedrun goes with, so I know it's good. But every time I play this game, I always choose the plasma charge shot. This attack increases the size of the blast, and leaves behind plasma whenever it hits an enemy, inflicting additional damage. It's very useful for beating basically everything in the game. Even the bulkiest of enemies die to one blast, and it obliterates mini bosses too. And it's solid on boss fights, since most of them stay in place for a few seconds, so they almost always take the plasma damage. It's just amazing. Most of my playthroughs of this game have actually been Buster only, because I find it really comfortable and fun in this game. In fact, X4 was the first game where I started fighting the Maverick stage bosses with only the Buster, because I realized learning the patterns was more fun than, well, this. So the Buster parts are an A+ for the plasma shot alone. Oh, and they let you charge up special weapons too. Speaking of, the head parts this time around give you unlimited ammo for regular special weapons. You'd think that would be really good, but I basically never run out of ammo for special weapons in these games. Even in X1, which had the best special weapons in the series, you always got generous amounts of it. And the special weapons for X in this game are just fine. The Twin Slasher is pretty cool, and I like how Soul Body projects a copy of X that hurts enemies. The Lightning Web weapon is also neat, in that you can wall jump off it, which helps get some collectibles. But the rest I barely use. They're a bit irrelevant because of how busted the plasma shot is. Maybe they could have nerfed it on regular enemies to give you more reason to use the special weapons, but I'm not complaining much. I personally would have preferred if the head parts worked the same as the ones in X3, that let you identify what collectibles you were missing in every stage. I just think that's a feature every X game should have. It's not like collectibles are even hard to find in this game, but it would have been a bit more helpful in my opinion. Regardless, the amazing leg and Buster parts make the 4th armor my favorite in the series. So those are the main differences between X and Zero in terms of gameplay. Zero gets better abilities after defeating bosses, while X gets incredible armor parts. There are other differences too. Like Zero's playthrough is quite harder than X's, since he never gets the damage reduction upgrade, and has to fight enemies up close, meaning he's more likely to get hit. Some of the Mavericks don't have weaknesses as Zero, which is a little weird, but I never use weaknesses on the bosses, so it doesn't bother me. X has an exclusive boss fight halfway through the game, while Zero gets a cutscene against the guy instead. And in the second to last level, they each have a different boss to fight at the beginning of the stage. But other than that, the playthroughs are the same in that they fight the same bosses and go through the same stages. I personally prefer X's playthrough a bit more than Zero's, mainly because of the 4th armor, and I like fighting from a distance. The game follows the standard structure in the series. There's an intro level, 8 Mavericks to fight in a non-linear order, some final stages, and a bunch of collectibles to grab. Once again, every Maverick stage contains a heart tank, but this time you only get 2 sub-tanks. I actually prefer this, since I think the game is balanced well around only being able to heal yourself twice. X2 kinda turned me away from having 4 sub-tanks. The other collectibles this time around are the weapon tank and the EX tank. The weapon tank restores your special weapon ammo, and if that sounds useless in this game, you're correct, since Zero's techniques don't use ammo except for the Giga attack, and X never runs out of special weapon ammo. And even if he did, it's unlimited anyway if you have the head parts. Very strange how the game with infinite special weapon ammo also gives you an item to refill it. And then the EX tank raises your maximum lives from 2 to 4, which sounds very helpful, except X4 kinda doesn't have lives anyway. Let me explain. In this game, every stage except the spaceport has 2 sections separated by a loading screen. Whenever you game over, you go back to the second section instead of the beginning of the level, which is what happened in the previous games. So the only real purpose of more lives is to give you more chances against the Maverick bosses and the boss rush. Because if you lose to one of those, you go back to the start of the section instead of the boss door or the partially completed boss rush. So it does have a purpose, unlike the weapon tank, it's just a bit niche. But hey, I do like how game overs don't kick you back to the start of the level. It's cool this game does that. Another neat feature is saving. The previous games all relied on passwords, but now you can save the game to a file. And you can even reload the final levels without having to replay Spaceport over again. That's awesome. To go back to the levels, they're really fun. They have the perfect mix of fast-paced platforming and combat, and they all feel distinct from each other without being gimmicky. Like Split Mushroom stage has a lot more vertical platforming than normal. Some stages like Storm Owl and Slash Beast have ride armor sections, where Cyber Peacock's level is all about making it to the end as fast as possible to get S ranks while dodging these yellow orbs that slow you down. You need S ranks to get all the collectibles in the stage. This is how you keep a game consistently fun and exciting the whole time. I would say the only level I don't like is Jet Stingrays, that's an auto-scroller on a ride chaser. The main issue I have with this stage isn't that it's an auto-scroller, it's a fast level, so that's fine. The problem is it's kinda hard to grab the sub-tank without dying in my experience. I've played this game countless times, and I usually have to do the second half of the level at least twice, which is annoying. But other than that, the levels are great. One thing I really like is all of them have descriptions explaining what the Maverick is doing and why we're fighting them. Like Slash Beast stage is on a bunch of trains that are Repliforce's supply route, so by beating him, we're cutting off their supplies. Details like this make the fictional world come alive a little. The same goes with the short dialogue with the Mavericks before you fight them. It's not much, but it's cool we get to know their personalities a little. Speaking of, the boss fights are the highlights of the game for me. It's very enjoyable figuring out their patterns so you can dodge their moves and attack them when they're vulnerable. Some are pretty hard without their weakness, namely Storm Owl and Cyber Peacock. Cyber Peacock in particular is kinda crazy since he teleports around and his attacks are fast, especially this missile that lasts for a while. You gotta be moving the whole time against this thing. The fight is also much harder as Zero since it's tricky to get close to him without taking damage. But it always feels rewarding when you beat the Mavericks in this game. I'm very happy to report the item game is much better in X4 than in the last game. There's only a few collectibles blocked off by special weapons this time, so you have much more freedom in how you route the game. And the routing's different between the two characters as well, since they get different upgrades. With Zero, I always start with Split Mushroom. Now this boss is admittedly pretty tough to do first, since he's moving around a lot and even makes a copy of himself. I used to game over on this guy a ton, so he's definitely not the greatest for beginners. But beating him unlocks the double jump and the circular slash, which is why he's always the first on my list. Next I do Jet Stingray's level, partially to get it over with, partially to get the air dash, but mainly for the first sub-tank. And I just died. I then took on Magma Dragoon, who you can actually fight in a ride armor, which helps because he's really aggressive otherwise. Beating him unlocks the uppercut, and with that, you can get every collectible at Zero now, since Dragoon's weapon unlocks the heart tanks, in Frost Walrus and Web Spider stages. I personally did Frost Walrus next because his level has the best grind spot in the game for your sub-tanks, with the upper pathway at the start of the level, which gives out a ton of free health that fills up half a tank and gives you an extra life too. After that, I did Cyber Peacock for the second sub-tank, followed by Storm Owl, Beast, and then I ended with Web Spider. That gets you every collectible for 0 with no backtracks, although that's not hard to do because his playthrough is really flexible. Magma Dragoon's weapon is the only real roadblock. X's playthrough is a little bit more limited, but still gives you a lot of freedom. With X, I always start off with Web Spider's level to get the like parts and his weapon, Lightning Web. I then take on Storm Owl because now that I have Lightning Web, I can get the Plasma Shot as soon as possible. I then did Jet Stingray to get him over with and grab the sub-tank. Now I have a lot of choices in what stage to tackle next, and I always mix it up. This playthrough I did Cyber Peacock for the head parts and the second sub-tank. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I adore this level. It's the best stage in any X game in my opinion. I love how it's all about platforming and shooting your way to the end while you're racing against the clock. It's a lot of fun, and I'm proud I can get the S ranks first try now. It's actually easier as 0 because his sword slashes through the orbs, and the double jump is better for fast platforming. Next, I tackled Beast and Magma Dragoon because Beast's weapon, when fully charged, unlocks the body armor part in Dragoon's level. And the last two I did were Frost Walrus and Split Mushroom. I probably could have done Split Mushroom earlier for his soul body weapon, but I really enjoy how in this routing, I did Zero's first Maverick last with X, and X's first Maverick last with 0. I think that's cute. And that's my route through the game with X. I'm really happy it nets me the 2 best armor parts first, and that I can play through the game without backtracking with either character. But wait, a viewer very familiar with X4 is saying, when did I grab the Heart Tank and Web Spider stage with X? You need Dragoon's weapon to get it, and I was missing it at the time. Well, the answer is, I didn't. I realized years ago that I've played this game so much that I don't need to backtrack for one Heart Tank. If it's your first playthrough, getting this would be a good idea, but I know this game like the back of my hand at this point. With X, you always need to do at least one backtrack to get all the items in this game, which is a little unfortunate because X2 isn't like this, but just one is okay, especially since there's a ton of different routes with minimal backtracking, unlike X3. Theoretically, you can miss out on a Heart Tank in the first 3 X games to avoid backtracking too, but in those games, you needed every collectible to get the secret move, and X4 doesn't have one of those, so you don't need every item. Instead of a secret move, there are 2 cheat codes you can input at the character select screen. X can get the ultimate armor from any Dr. Light capsule that, aside from looking cool, immediately unlocks the whole 4th armor, and it gives X unlimited Nova Strike attacks. I do wish you could get this in the main playthrough because it'd be really helpful in the boss rush, but oh well. Zero meanwhile just gets a recolor. That's kinda lame, but it does look nice. X4 was the first entry in the series to be developed for the PlayStation 1. This means the graphics are much better than the previous games on the Super Nintendo. The character designs, visual effects, backgrounds, even the extra lives are all improved, and they still hold up today, since the game uses 2D sprites that have aged much better than early 3D models. In particular, I really like the visual effects and the designs for X and Zero. The way they move is so fluid. This game added an afterimage effect whenever they dash to emphasize how fast they're going, which I think is a nice touch. And then the look of Zero swinging his Z-Saber, or X firing a plasma charge shot, are very visually appealing to me. The PS1 X games are my favorite art style for any Mega Man game. The soundtrack in this game is good too. It's not amazing. X1 and maybe X2 have the better music, since the songs in this game are more atmospheric, but they're still enjoyable. My favorite track is Web Spider's level. X4 also has some voice lines from the characters during gameplay. X and Zero let out grunts anytime they jump, like Link in Ocarina of Time, and some of the end bosses have voice lines right before the battle begins. That part makes more sense, since this game is the first in the series to have voice acting in the cutscenes. Oh right, I haven't discussed the story yet. The plot is there's a Reploid army called Repliforce, whose general meets with Sigma. Sigma wants them to go Maverick, but when their general refuses, Sigma gets the Maverick Hunter Magma Dragoon to cross the Sky Lagoon into the city below, killing countless innocent people. Repliforce is framed for the incident, and they respond by refusing to clear their names out of pride and declaring their independence from humanity. Okay, stop. First of all, why does the general not see that by declaring independence, he's doing what Sigma wanted him to do? Why does Repliforce let themselves be framed without even trying to prove they didn't kill innocent people? Who does that? And why is Cyber Peacock trying to destroy the internet if these guys aren't Mavericks? This story is pretty dumb. X and Zero have to go and fight the Repliforce members and the traitorous Magma Dragoon. Dragoon is present in the intro stage and has unique dialogue with X and Zero after you defeat him, which is actually pretty cool. I like the idea that one of the 8 Mavericks you fight is uniquely important to the story, and the game hints he's working for Sigma because his health bar has Sigma's symbol on it, whereas the other Mavericks have the Repliforce symbol. Repliforce eventually goes into space, where X and Zero defeat the Colonel, the General, and Sigma, who is so comically evil in this game that he tries to blow up the planet with a laser. I thought he just hated humans. How does destroying Earth help with that? That's just lazy writing. The General sacrifices himself to stop the weapon, and X and Zero return home. That's what's shared across both stories. X and Zero's campaigns do differ from each other. X works with this guy named Double, who is revealed to have been a spy for Sigma, and Double crosses him. Pun entirely intended there, by the way, blame Capcom. Reminded of all the Reploids he knows who have gone Maverick, he calls Zero and begs to be killed if he goes Maverick himself. Zero's story is much more substantial. He keeps dreaming about his creator, who he doesn't recognize, but we know it's Dr. Wily from the classic series. He saves the Colonel's sister Iris, who is torn between her love for Zero and her brother. Things get really complicated when Zero kills the Colonel. Iris attacks Zero, and she dies after the battle. Zero is heartbroken and goes to confront Sigma, who reveals in a flashback that Zero used to be a Maverick. He fought Sigma and is actually the person who gave him his scars. But something inside his helmet interrupted Zero, allowing Sigma to win the battle. Zero is cured of being a Maverick, but it's implied that this fight is what corrupted Sigma in the first place, kickstarting the events of the whole X series. Zero then defeats Sigma, and reflects back on how he used to be a monster, and just had to kill his kind of girlfriend and her brother. Hey Zero, want some ice cream when you get back from your mission?
Iris, did we Reploids all turn out to be Mavericks after all?
Seriously, is that a no on the ice cream? X's story definitely feels like small potatoes compared to Zero's, huh? I like how X is confronted by the question, what happens if he goes Maverick? It's never paid off, but it's a neat idea at least. There are more positives to say about Zero's story. Everything with Dr. Wily and Sigma is great development that makes Zero an interesting character because he was definitely not made to be a hero. That's the best idea in this story because it parallels X and Zero since X was created by Dr. Light to help humanity. So them being friends is ironic, and it really does seem like fate that they would eventually have to fight each other. On the other hand, everything with Repliforce falls flat because the conflict isn't written well. It doesn't work as a battle of two opposing philosophies when we know basically nothing about humans in the X timeline, so I don't understand why Repliforce wants to be independent from them. And of course Sigma is pulling the strings the whole time, so it's not really a battle of ideologies. The Repliforce are also so dumb. And then Iris gets no development as a character, so I can't feel bad for her when she dies, especially because her brother was the Colonel. So the story is kinda bad, but it is a more involved plot than the previous games, and Zero's backstory is legitimately good. And I do like how there are animated cutscenes, especially because they gave us gems like this.
Ah! No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
Yeah, the English voice acting is awful, but it works in a so bad it's good way. It's funny because the game takes itself so seriously, and meanwhile X sounds like this.
Wait, Zero! I'm serious!
10 out of 10. The translation for Mega Man games in this period has always been bad, but it's definitely worse than usual in X4. The most notable example is Sigma reminding Zero that he was a Maverick, and then after the flashback, Sigma's surprised he was a Maverick. Bro, it's your flashback! Okay, the question mark is not supposed to be there, but I hope you can understand how bad the translation can be. But at the end of the day, the story isn't why people play these games, and I skip the cutscenes most of the time anyway. Returning to the gameplay, the final levels are solid in this game. The first is well designed because it encourages you to use your special weapons to beat the enemies. You fight the Colonel here, who I ironically think is easier than when you fight him halfway through X's playthrough because you can dodge his attacks with wall jumps this time. The second stage has two splitting paths, a tough ride armor section, and a pretty easy platforming sequence. The general fight at the end of the level is really weird. With Zero, it's potentially the hardest fight in the game since it's really tough to get close to him and attack without taking damage yourself. I pretty much always have to use at least one sub-tank here. Conversely with X, It's literally the easiest fight in the game because the plasma charge shot hits him across the stage, meaning you don't have to jump on his hands at all. How sad is it that I'm kicking his ass and we're not even on the same screen? The boss rush is boring as always. It's a bit worse in this game actually, since there's no insta-kill moves and explosions take longer, which sucks. And now we get to the final boss. You can only damage his first phase with Magma Dragoon's weapon, and he's pretty easy to dodge, since after his third teleport, he'll always swing his scythe across the stage so you can wall jump over him. In the second phase, he throws his scythe in an arc that can be easily dodged, then he throws the scythe again, and it lands either on the floor or on one of the walls depending on your positioning. If it lands on the ground, you can't really stand there because of the electricity, and he spawns these boomerangs that home in on you while Sigma is still attacking. It's very hard to dodge all that. Make sure it lands on the wall, because then you can run to the other wall and easily attack Sigma while he shoots a laser across the ground. When you know what you're doing, these two phases are very easy. The final phase has more attacks and 2 separate health bars, but it's not too bad when you get the patterns down. It's definitely easier as X, since you can destroy these heads with the plasma shot. Recently when I've played this game, I beat the whole final boss without using a single sub-tank with either character. This time I did need a sub-tank for Zero. But with X, I beat the whole thing without using a single sub-tank. In fact, I beat the whole game without ever using a sub-tank on X, which I didn't even realize. Were there times I should have used one? Who's to say? This is the only game I can do this in, by the way. So the final boss is great. I would say it's a fair challenge that really tests your skills. It's a fitting end to an amazing journey. I've covered a lot so far in this review, but there's one important part that's still missing. My experience with this game. I first played X4 on the X collection when I was a 12-year-old who couldn't make it far in X3. I played through the game with X and made it all the way to Sigma, who I couldn't beat at the time. I then tried playing the game as Zero and I could not get very far with him. So I just gave up and didn't play the other games in the X series, even after I emulated X3. I played the whole Classic series, but the X games are too tough for me. I then just replayed X1 until I stopped playing Mega Man games. But then one day when I was 17, we had just come home from visiting colleges and I had a desire to play X4. So I bought the game for like $5 on my PS3 and played as Zero. I tried over and over again to beat Split Mushroom until I finally did, and I was eventually able to beat the whole game. I then played and beat it as X, and then I just kept on playing it. A lot. When you skip the cutscenes, this game is pretty short. You can beat one of the 2 playthroughs in barely an hour if you know what you're doing. So it became a routine when I was bored that I would play X4, usually on a Friday night during my senior year when I didn't have a social life. I could always just rely on this game to have a good time. And it got me back into the X series. I played the other games too, and then revisited X2, X3, and Classic Mega Man. X1 is the game that got me into the series, but X4 made me into a big fan. Mega Man is my 3rd favorite game series, behind Sonic and Pokemon, and it's all because of this game. It's the Mega Man game I go back to the most. I can't even count how many times I've played it. I replay both playthroughs at least once every year. It's just so much fun and comforting, really. I have good memories associated with it too. I have some minor complaints that I discussed in this video, but I love this game. It's up there with X1 in terms of quality, although I like X4 a bit more. This is the best Mega Man game to me. There's barely a dull moment, there's a lot of freedom in the item game, Zero as a playable character is a really fresh addition, the production values are very good, the levels are great, the bosses are awesome, and X is the most fun he's ever been because of the 4th armor. I'd put it in my top 5 games of all time. It's just art. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe. See you guys next time.